Bryan, we think it's better if you don't come to the party. You don't fit in with this bright crowd. That was what my father said. His words not only hurt me, but felt like a sharp knife stabbing into my heart, making me feel like the world was collapsing right beneath my feet. I stood still like a statue, unable to believe what I had just heard. The entire room became eerily silent. I, Bryan, 35 years old, a successful man, co-founder of a technology company with over 100 employees with a stable career, but in my father's eyes, I was still just the son who was not pretty enough to stand next to my sister's boyfriend. Those words from my father felt like a slap to my face. I had sacrificed so much to prove myself, to be worthy in my family's eyes. I had stood up on my own, built a career from scratch. I didn't need anyone's help, just the recognition from those I loved the most. But now my father had confirmed that I was not worthy of attending my mother's birthday party, simply because my appearance was not bright enough to stand beside my sister's new boyfriend. The reason for this rejection was simple: appearance. But I knew, in reality, it wasn't just that. It wasn't only about what I saw in the mirror every morning, but all that I had done to take care of this family over the years, the sacrifices that no one in the family recognized. I had quietly paid all the household bills for my parents for the past 5 years, from electricity, water, internet, to health insurance. I had done it all without a single thank you. I never asked for attention, never expected any praise. I just wanted my family to see me as an important part of their lives. But it seemed like I was always the outsider. And my sister's boyfriend, the one my father praised as perfect, elegant, was actually an employee under my command at the company. He was handsome, that couldn't be denied, but the feeling of being looked down upon by my own family when they only focused on outward appearances was undeniable. He wasn't someone I hated, but I couldn't help but feel like an outcast in the very home I had worked so hard to care for. My mother, who always stayed silent when my father favored my sister, didn't say a word either. In my parents' eyes, my appearance, the one I had built my whole life, was never enough to make them proud. I, who had done everything, who had sacrificed, was now just a spare part in my own family. And I realized that this was a betrayal I could never forgive. Since I was young, I had always felt like the second child. Even though I was smart, independent, and had a solid career in my parents' eyes, I was just the child not special enough to be noticed. My mother, always silent, whenever my father lavished praise on my sister, made me feel even more abandoned. On evenings when the whole family gathered, my sister would boast about her new achievements, from receiving compliments about her beauty to glamorous meetings. My father, with pride in his eyes, would continuously praise her. "You're so beautiful, so confident, like a star." And my mother would just sit silently, saying nothing. And I, standing in a corner, not knowing what to say, just silently looking at my sister with envy and pain in my heart. "She's receiving compliments again," I muttered to myself, knowing I couldn't do anything else. My father turned to look at me, his gaze cold, as if nothing mattered to me. "You should learn from your sister," he said, his tone sweet but laced with sarcasm. My heart tightened, but I couldn't say anything. I could only remain silent because if I spoke up, my parents would think I was envious, that I didn't appreciate what I had. In fact, all I wanted was to be loved like my sister, to be able to stand next to the family without feeling like an outsider, a shadow in that bright space. Yet no one knew that for the past 5 years, I had quietly taken care of this family by paying all the household bills. Electricity, water, internet, health insurance, everything was taken care of by me. Each month, I took a significant portion of my income to keep everything running, but I never spoke about it, never once asking for thanks. I simply wanted my family not to worry about these things. But no matter what I did, my parents only saw my sister. One day, after I had tried my hardest to prove my worth, my father suddenly said something that felt like a slap to my face. "Bryan, we think it's better if you don't come to the party. You don't fit in with this bright crowd." His words were like a punch in the face. I stood frozen, unable to say a word. Each of my father's words seemed to tear apart my soul. How many times had I tried to prove myself? How many times had I worked tirelessly to ensure my family didn't have to worry about money, but all I received in return was this rejection? My mother sat in silence, not protesting, not asking a single question. My eyes turned toward my sister, the one my father always praised. She just smiled faintly, her face filled with smugness, completely unaware of my pain. "Don't be sad, you just don't fit the elegant style," she said to me, her tone gentle as if she were comforting me, but in reality, it felt more like a mockery. My sister, the one my father always viewed as the ideal model, was the one who indirectly made me feel like a failure in my own family. I wanted to scream, I wanted to say that I could also be beautiful, that I could be confident, but I knew that would be pointless. Any words I said would just be an unnecessary protest. It felt like all my sacrifices had suddenly become meaningless. Why is this happening? I asked myself inside, though I already knew the answer. I had sacrificed so much for them, but in their eyes, I was still just the second child. When my father rejected me from attending my mother's birthday party because I wasn't pretty enough to stand next to my sister's boyfriend, I felt like a shadow with no place in the home I had devoted my youth to care for. I had quietly paid all the household bills, worrying about them every day, but all I received in return was indifference and contempt. I had given so much, but all I got was apathy and coldness from the very people I loved the most. Truly, I no longer wanted to prove anything. After being deeply hurt by my father's rejection, I decided I would no longer let them disrespect me. It had gone too far. I had sacrificed too much, tried too long to prove myself, and never received any recognition. They didn't see what I did, they didn't see my pain, and I couldn't let that continue. I chose silence, but it wasn't submission. It was a silent protest they would have to face. I sat in my room, staring at my computer screen, filled with determination. No texts, no calls, I told myself. I canceled all the automatic payments for the services I had quietly paid for my family over the years. Electricity, water, health insurance, internet, everything. Cutting off each service felt like liberation. I didn't need to be the one helping them anymore. I didn't want to keep nurturing those who only came to me when they needed support. The day of my mother's birthday arrived, and I knew I was ready. At exactly 6 p.m. when the party was starting, I sat in my room, looking out the window, imagining the scene unfolding in my parents' house. The whole family gathered, guests chatting and laughing, but no one knew that the price for their indifference was coming fast. As soon as the clock struck 6, like a clear signal, everything in their house began to change. First, the electricity went out. The entire house was plunged into darkness, no warm light as usual. I imagined everyone inside standing frozen, looking at each other in confusion. The air conditioning stopped running, and the house grew hot and stifling. I smiled faintly, feeling like I had just hit my target. Next, the water, no more running water. The bathtubs were dry, and the sound of water running in the bathroom ceased. They wouldn't be able to take showers or do anything like they normally did. Things that seemed so obvious suddenly disappeared. And then, the Wi-Fi, no internet, no one could connect with each other, no one could play music or live stream the party as they had planned. Everything suddenly went silent. The crowd that had been talking and laughing before was now quiet and confused. My sister's boyfriend, the one my father always praised for his perfect appearance, walked over and looked at his computer, visibly annoyed. He furrowed his brow and then asked, his tone betraying confusion, "Why hasn't this month's bill been paid? Everything hasn't been updated yet?" My parents tried to contact me, but my phone no longer worked for them. That feeling, hearing the phone ring but not getting any response from me, truly made me feel free. I didn't have to explain anything anymore. Everything was clear. The people I had sacrificed for, cared for, and worried about were now the ones who had to face this truth. While they were panicking, trying to call me, I just sat silently, my eyes gazing out the window. I smiled faintly, as if I had just won a battle. A battle that had no fighting, no sharp words. I hadn't said anything. I didn't need to say anything. All I wanted was for them to realize that I could walk away, and now they had to live without me in their lives. But I didn't feel regret. Everything they were facing was the dependency they could no longer deny. Every time I thought about my sacrifices, I felt I had done the right thing. My mother and father, they would have to face the reality that no one was there to help them anymore. 3 days later, my parents stood at the door of my house. They brought flowers, cakes, and the same empty apologies I had grown too familiar with. I opened the door, and they walked in, holding bouquets of fresh flowers, their eyes filled with discomfort, but also a sense of self-satisfaction. My father, the one I had spent my childhood seeking approval from, looked at me with a tense expression, as if waiting for me to soften. My mother stood quietly, her eyes red, probably from staying up late worrying about this situation. "Son, it's just a misunderstanding. Don't hold a grudge over something so small," my father said, his voice gentle but filled with an attempt to soothe. His words rang out like a habit, nothing new. My mother added, "We didn't mean to hurt you. Why did you do this to us?" I stood in silence, not responding right away. I looked at them, feeling a void in my heart. I couldn't pretend to be happy like I used to, couldn't mend everything with sweet words. I had heard these words too many times, and they had become meaningless, no longer carrying any sincerity. Every word coming from their mouths now only made me feel emptier. With each apology they offered, I felt more and more like an outsider, as if there was no place for me in this very home. Every moment of the past 3 days, I had thought deeply about what I would say, how I should confront them. And now, as they stood in front of me, I knew I had to say one thing, just one thing to end it all. I looked at my parents, my gaze cold, devoid of emotion. I was no longer the naive child who believed in empty apologies. I only needed to say one sentence to put an end to everything with no turning back. I took a deep breath and then spoke, my voice devoid of any emotion. "If I'm ugly enough to embarrass you in front of others, then I'm invisible enough for you to live without me." Those words felt like a knife cutting off all ties between us. No anger, no shouting, just a cold and decisive statement. I didn't need to explain anything further. I didn't need to keep trying for a family that didn't recognize my worth. My words were firm and clear, making the air in the room feel suffocating. My parents stood frozen, unable to speak. My mother looked at me with eyes full of disappointment, her hands gripping the bouquet tightly, as if she couldn't believe her son could say such things. My father lowered his head, his eyes also showing regret, but then he just remained silent, as if he knew that his apology no longer held any value. I didn't need to say anything more. I had given up all hope for this family long ago. This entire family, now just a part of my past that I wanted to forget. I no longer sought acceptance or love from them. They were no longer the people I could continue hoping for, and I didn't need to go back to seek that from them. I no longer wanted to live in lies. I would no longer accept the disrespect that had seeped into every word, every action of theirs. I had spent my childhood, my youth, searching for their love, but now I realized that true love only comes from those who know how to value you, not from those who only come to you when they need help. I turned my back, no longer looking at them. No anger, no sadness, just emptiness. The door closed, and I felt like I had closed a chapter in my life. The chapter I never wanted to remember again. After that conversation, when I had said everything I needed to, my life seemed to turn a new page. I no longer hoped for anything from this family. Everything had become so clear. The love, the care, or the recognition that I had longed for all these years was now just empty words, meaningless things that I no longer needed. I had let go, not because I no longer loved them, but because I realized that to live happily, I had to live for myself, not for anyone else's approval. I began to find joy in real relationships, in friends, colleagues, and people I could truly share my life with, where a person's value is not measured by appearance or social status. These people saw me, not through my exterior, but through my efforts, through what I did. And that made me feel free, made me feel like I had value. I poured all my energy into my work, into the company I had built from scratch. Each day that passed, I felt stronger. The company thrived, and I also found joy in the volunteer work I became involved in. I no longer had to bend over backward to please anyone else, and that was the best thing I could have gained. I helped those in need, not for recognition, but because I truly wanted to. The hours I worked were no longer tied to any other goal, but to build a life worthy of myself. The quiet days passed, and I no longer had to worry about what my parents needed from me. They gradually lost the financial support I had provided for so many years. No more money was transferred to them each month. No more bills were paid automatically. And no one in the family even bothered to ask about me. That feeling made me feel relieved, as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Meanwhile, my sister started to realize that the boyfriend my parents always praised, the one they considered perfect, was just an opportunist. It turned out he was only using her for the wealth and power she brought. After a few months, my sister broke up with him. I wasn't the one to say, "I told you so," but deep down, I felt a part of me rejoice. She had realized that no matter how beautiful or high-ranking you were, the truth and sincerity were what mattered most. And I also realized that my family wasn't the place where I'd find comfort. It was the place I had tried so hard to change without ever being appreciated. Now, I am no longer the son who's not worthy. I no longer have to accept living in the shadow of my family's judgment. I am the one who gets to choose who enters my life, who I can truly trust and share with. My family, if they need me, will have to find a way to live without me. I no longer feel guilty about this decision. I've learned that to live a meaningful life, sometimes you have to let go of the things that have held you back for too long, and only then can you walk the path you truly desire. For me, life now belongs to me with no pressure, no meaningless sacrifices. I am the one who decides my future, and I won't let anyone, even family, stop me. Have you ever been overlooked by your family just because of your appearance or status? Do you think silence can also be a powerful form of protest? If you believe self-respect should be placed in the right place, even with family, like, comment, and subscribe to continue following these deep and human family justice stories.